All right, we're starting with a story that's everywhere right now, and we're asking, should boxer Imarn Khelif be competing at the Olympics? Now, yesterday, the Algerian boxer went up against Italy's Carini in a round of 16 bout, but Angela ended up withdrawing after just 46 seconds. She said that it was impossible to continue after being struck by such significant punches. Here's what happened.
Carini operating from the southpaw stance. Just falling a little bit short there. Solid straight right hand from Khelif there. Bout being pulled off by the referee.
In red from Algeria, Imarn Khelif.
Khelif taking the win. As Carini abandoned the bout.
Imarn was certified female when she was born, and pictures have surfaced of her growing up as a girl. However, last year she was disqualified from the World Championships in New Delhi after failing a gender eligibility test. The International Boxing Association claimed DNA tests had proved that she had an XY chromosome, leading to claims that she was biologically male. Now, the International Olympic Committee had allowed her to take part in the Paris Games, as it says that she has been competing in the women's category for years. A spokesperson actually reacted to the backlash this morning. Take a look.
There are suspicions all the time about, or can be suspicions about people's sex. Unfortunately, it's not up to, or fortunately, it's not up to us to act on all those suspicions, because if we did, I think we would be dealing with that from now till forever. So the eligibility on this specific issue is if their national document, their passport, has them as a woman.
So do you think they were right to make this decision? 0207 862 2222 is the number you need. Tessa, what do you think about this situation? It is a complex one.
Very. I feel really sorry, actually, for the boxer involved, Imarn, because, I mean, she's clearly had quite a time of it. I'm glad to see that Algeria, her country's got behind her and is supporting her, and I hope looking after her, because she'll need it. She's found herself at the centre of the sort of culture wars, if nothing else. It's fascinating that none of this was a controversy, by the way, in Tokyo just 3 years ago, because Tokyo Olympics happening a bit later because of COVID. It ought to be said, the International Boxing Association, which prevented her from competing in the World Championships, have been questioned by the Olympic Committee. They say they have failings in governance, finance and ethical issues. And while Russia
they are probably separate issues.
Right, but it's not, because it's interesting that while the Olympic Committee will take guidance from other sporting federations, they have rejected the guidance from the Boxing Federation, the head of which is a Russian. I'm just saying what's already out there. So there's huge questions around this. And I think I'd also like to point out that Imarn did not win a gold. She's not going out there as a big he-man winning every single round. The last time she was allowed to compete in the World Championship, she got silver. And in Tokyo, I think she got through to the quarterfinals.
So are you saying that's the criteria, is whether they win or not?
No, I'm simply saying that in this case, we're talking about a boxer who's come under the spotlight, she hasn't changed. Her gender hasn't changed since she last competed at the Olympics. What's changed is the environment and the conversations around gender. And
I think you're right in saying the conversation's changed. Yeah. I think calling it culture wars might be a bit on the dismissive side. I think that there are people who have concerns about security. I really think that the IOC have got to take a hell of a lot of the blame in this, because there's not a standardised process by which they confirm eligibility. There's been a lot of misconceptions that have been allowed to flourish, including that this is a trans issue. It's not a trans issue. No, it's something else. And the issue it boils down to is whether someone is. There's several ways they can test. I understand whether or not somebody's metabolically male in terms of chromosomes, testosterone levels, which can change for a number of reasons, and also visual examinations, organs, and all that sort of stuff.
So you think that every competitor should be subjected to this?
Well, I haven't said that yet at all. What I'm saying is the fact that the IOC don't have anything beyond what's on your passport as a test of eligibility. When it comes to, look, it's a difficult thing in all sports when it comes to competence, grip strength and length of limbs, bone density, all that stuff. it's understandable that boxing is where it's really come to a head. We're talking about people facing potentially serious risk, and there's not a standardised test or eligibility process.
And maybe there should be when we have, I mean, what Imarn Khelif is supposed to have is something called DSD, which is difference of sexual disorder, which means she can have chromosomes of a man but still have the body essentially represent as a woman, and she's grown up as a woman. There are people with DSD who have went on to have children, for example. So you can't say that she is not a woman on the grounds of having this condition. So maybe we do have to start to standardise gender testing so that we all know whether the parameters are right or wrong, what the parameters are when you're going into that kind of level of professional athletics.
Isn't that where biology lets us down, though, Storm? Because our biology isn't standard. It's not very easy to standardise certain things. You said yourself there are 3 different categories which themselves are subject to variance.
Well,
in the way in which that you can test people's gender.
One of them is testosterone. I think
which varies.
Chromosomes are fairly black and white. I don't think biology's ever been let down by chromosomes. They tell a story.
Well, or organs. I mean, if you've got ovaries and a uterus and all that, that is one definition
which is very
of a woman.
I can speak, on behalf of just normal people watching this show and the viewers of this show. It is like there's so much reading to do on this. Just as prep for this, I read one story. I kept reading. You talk about organs. Yeah, of course, if somebody has what appears to be female organs, you think, that would solve the story. But then people then say that you could have those organs, but also still have the larger heart, the bone density, the grip strength. It is so complicated. And I suppose the real thing to be suspicious of is anybody that's telling you that it's totally clear cut.
The other thing is that I think what we have to focus on when we switch on the telly every night. I would love to be able to do backflips like, who's the really famous gymnastic?
Simone Biles.
Yeah, I can't do them.
She is incredible, isn't she?
Physical outliers. So in order to compete at an Olympic level, almost in any sport, but particularly in strength and agility sports, track and field, etc., you have to be an outlier in your category. So you have to have extraordinary characteristics.
In a moment, because I think actually that does have a part to play in this whole conversation. Now, you said it wasn't a trans issue. It isn't a trans issue, but it most definitely affects the trans community because lots of people are misinformed when it comes to this conversation. So let's bring in activist and football player Natalie Washington. Natalie, it has become clear that this isn't a trans debate, and just make it very clear why it is not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, first of all, that I'm pleased that the standard of the conversation we're having here is an informed one, and that we're acknowledging that actually this is complex and it isn't easy to communicate to the general public who don't maybe have a scientific background or don't have the kind of, haven't been able to do the reading, as Jeff puts it. It's super complicated. And I think we have a responsibility as people communicating to the public to be accountable, to be honest, and to make sure that we're acknowledging that complexity. And yes, as you say, right, so this conversation has evolved over the last few years because there has been a lot of conversation about trans women particularly participating in sport. Now, of course, in this Olympics, that isn't an issue. There are 0 trans women participating in any of the categories. They've been banned from most of them, and those that they haven't been banned from, there's no one that's qualified. There's nobody that's good enough. So there is no longer that aspect to this conversation. However, a lot of people are still very angry about this topic, and obviously are then overlaying that anger on this topic, which is, I think we hope we can all agree, is a fundamentally different one. As you said, we're talking about someone here who was observed to be female at birth. They've grown up knowing themselves to be a girl, to be a woman. We don't know when they, as it's been put, failed a sex test at the World Championships a couple of years ago. We don't know whether they had any knowledge that they have this variation in sex characteristics, if that is what we have, because we do have very little knowledge on that. We only have what the IBA have said. So it is a super complicated topic, and I think it's important we talk about it responsibly.
It is certainly. I also want to ask you, though, what impact this will have on the trans community, because actually if we decide that Imarn can compete at that level in the women's category, when the difference may be that she has elevated testosterone levels, that would actually be an argument to bring in trans women into the sport again, because that was the argument, or that is the argument, to keep them out. Am I wrong?
It is part of the argument. Again, it's super complicated, right? Because we've got these variations in innate sex characteristics, which some of these will then have developmental impacts, which means that there may or may not be physiological differences that these people that have. So you can, for example, have a chromosomal variation, which doesn't lead to a developmental difference that has an impact on sporting performance, or you have one that can. So this is why in the past, sporting governing bodies have been very keen to do this on a per case basis, because you can do a chromosomal test, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a performance impact further down the line. And to go back to your question about trans people.
Sorry, carry on. Sorry, carry on, Natalie.
Oh, thank you. To go back to your question about trans people, the impact here is quite a social one as well, because of course there's a lot of anger. The abuse directed towards Imarn Khelif has been atrocious on this topic, and there's a lot of anger that's directed at women like her, and also collaterally at trans women. That's one impact. Secondly, as you say, around sporting performance, one of the arguments for excluding trans women, which again has happened in most of the sports at the Olympics, is that around testosterone level, impact on physiology. It is different, and I think it's important that we talk about it's different, because the impact of hormones, chromosomes, developmental differences, when somebody started gender reforming hormone treatment, that's super complicated. I think we have to be careful not to muddy the waters by talking about trans issues here when this is really something that is separate, although clearly in a lot of people's minds they're linked. But I think it's really important that we keep them separate.
I do wonder though whether actually the way to sort this out and level the playing field is to have some sort of standard where every contestant that is competing in the Olympics, and unfortunately that will include the 14-year-old gymnast, has a gender test, whether we decide whether that's testosterone levels or a chromosomal test, and therefore we all know the parameters in which we're dealing with. Do you think that would be a fair way of doing things?
It's a real challenge, and for two reasons. So one is that in every sport it's going to show up differently. So obviously, like, this is boxing, where obviously the physicality of that sport I think is clear to everyone. Whereas if you're talking about shooting, the physicality is completely different. Does it matter if someone has a slight percentage difference in their kind of blood testosterone level, or even a sporting performance metric? Like, does that really matter so much? It's different. The other thing is that sport has a fairly terrible history of sex testing. It goes back a very long time. It goes back before the modern Olympics even started, people making accusations about people's sex and then testing. And a lot of that testing has been horribly dehumanizing over the years. There's a report which I really recommend people read by Human Rights Watch, which is called They're Chasing Us Away from Sport. And it talks about the experiences of women with variations in sex characteristics, detailing human rights abuses that were enacted through the imposition of sex testing on those women. We're talking about, invasion of bodily autonomy, invasion of privacy, suicide attempts. We're talking about people being chased away and having to become refugees, leaving their home countries because of these sometimes allegations, sometimes confirmed things about their physiology. In a lot of the world, this sort of variation, this innate variation, is absolutely not accepted. And that puts those women in huge danger. So we have to be very careful talking about sex testing, that we don't enact human rights abuses on the people that are the subject of that. So it's not. I'm certainly very, very wary about across the board sex testing.
Okay,
because
Natalie,
ultimately we're talking about sport.
Natalie, thank you very much for joining us and also clearing up that it is different to the trans debate, although there will obviously be an impact on the trans community. Natalie Washington there. Okay, plenty of stars are actually saying that Imarn should be banned. Two-time Olympic boxing champion Nicola Adams reacted this morning. She said that she stands by Angela Carini and that people who have gone through male puberty shouldn't be competing in women's sports. That's why we make it very clear that this is not a trans debate, because even somebody who is a former Olympian seems to have got the information wrong there.
Yeah, because there's no evidence that she went through male puberty.
No. She, as far as we are all aware, she was designated female at birth, and she has grown up as a woman.
So, but just to be clear, do you mean grown up culturally as a woman? Because obviously there is this intimation. This is what's so difficult, is it seems to be quite opaque in some ways, is there's this chromosome test. That's what I'm still trying to get my head around. Does that chromosome test that mean that even if you have superficial external features that might make people think you're a woman, whether or not that has a metabolic effect on the other things like heart size, bone density? So is it still possible that you could have gone through what some people would see as
I think we would need a doctor and a scientist for that. But I believe it varies from person to person with this.
Some people with the XY chromosome, some who identify as women with the XY chromosome have been known to go on and give birth as a woman.
Yes.
So we're saying, so the way they're born, but it's like I used to row really seriously at quite a high level. And those women who were bigger and stronger, and some had the most, our trainer was an ex-Olympian. She was enormous. She would have beefcaked out my brothers. Do you know, she had lung capacity.
But
so we're talking about people on the very edge.
But we've always
specifications.
accepted that there will be born women with XX chromosomes who are bigger and stronger. That's not the debate here. No one's ever saying that hasn't been a thing before. It's those internal things that can sometimes give competitive advantages that people are concerned about. I mean, Nicola Adams, I would say, you know, an Olympic gold medalist. You might not necessarily agree with what she said, but you certainly got to take it on board, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, but she is point blank wrong when she says, because she's alluding to the fact that this is a trans debate.
Right, well, in that, yeah, absolutely.
So we're showing you that just to show that even the most informed of people are getting this one wrong. Olympian swimmer Sharon Davies says that testing is a good idea and it only takes 1 minute in your life. She thinks it only has to happen once. She says that they don't have to be that intrusive. And then author J.K. Rowling, who's obviously very vocal in women's rights, says that in this case of a man beating a woman in public for our entertainment, she also calls Imarn a bullying cheat.
Oh, do you know what? That puts me off the Harry Potter brand immediately. I'm not going to introduce my 5-year-old to the Harry Potter brand. That's so disappointing and crass and kind of ill-informed from J.K. Rowling there, referring to her as a cheat. Actually, the Olympic Committee have allowed this girl to compete. But it's J.K. Rowling sitting there as a keyboard warrior.
But it just goes to show how passionate people are feeling about
the language there is one thing. But I believe that Judy Murray has also come. Would you think that Judy Murray was?
But did she use that kind of language?
No, that's the point. No. I said.
But I think the language that we use is probably very important.
But the language is important. But what I'm saying is, in terms of positioning in the argument, Judy Murray has also come out along these lines, and she wouldn't strike me as somebody that would say that just to hurt feelings. So I'm just saying it's about, you know, taking these things on.
OK, I just want to go to calls. Edna from London, you've been waiting quite a while there. What's your views on this?
Hello. Thank you very much for listening to me. I just wanted to, I've been listening to everything and been thinking about it because one of the things that I'm, as somebody who's a third dan black belt kickboxer, I know from a professional perspective that if you look at how contact sports are actually organised, they have weight categories and it's in the interest of fairness. So we can take it away from the trans because that's not really where I'm going at the moment. We have weight categories in the interest of fairness and safety. So when you're actually competing, the whole point is it's a competition. So you're competing on a plain level field. But if somebody naturally has a higher level of testosterone, that comes along with a physiological ability to be stronger, even if they're at the same weight. So there's no reason why we can't create a band where we actually look at the higher testosterone levels, because as athletes, they've been training just as hard as everybody else for what they want. But a 60-kilo fighter who has a high level of testosterone should not be fighting against a 60-kilo fighter.
Break now, but I do hear what you're saying. That you think there should be other bands created, maybe adding in both weight and testosterone level just to try and make things a little bit fairer. Sorry, I had to cut you off so quickly there. Later, we're going to be talking about Will.